In the last video, we talked about the basic of masking fluid, what type of masking fluid I use, how to set it up, and how to apply it. If you haven't watched that one, make sure you check out that one out first. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 ways I use masking fluid that I believe really enhanced my painting. Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. There are many different ways of using masking fluid. I have been seeing some artists using it in a very complex painting and it looked amazing. But I like to keep things simple, so here are 3 ways I use masking fluid. Number 1, to cleanly preserve small details. During painting, if there is a shape lighter in value, we usually paint around it to preserve the light. But if the shape is very small or slim, it can be difficult to paint around it, especially in a big wash. And if you slow down too much to preserve small detail, you're risking your wash to dry prematurely. This is where masking fluid come in handy. The wash will be nice and consistent, and the details will be clean and easy to preserve. In this example, I'm using 2 pieces of masking tape to mask out a long slim shape for a boat mast. I then apply the masking fluid. I remove the tape after it's dry, and then I don't have to worry about them anymore. I can just paint big washes, knowing that the masking fluids will do their job and preserve these shapes for me. Number 2, to create a bright highlight. This is a pretty obvious use of masking fluid. Technically, you can use white gouache afterwards for highlights, but between the white of the paper and white gouache, I prefer the cleanness and the brightness of the paper itself. It's just so much cleaner and brighter, especially for places like car's headlight or signal. Since the value range of a physical painting is not like the real world that can get blindingly bright, the white of the paper is going to be the brightest light in your painting. It's often better to keep them pure white than introduce a bit of light colors around them. So in this example, I paint the warmth of the light first to show how the headlight influenced the colors around it. And when I remove the masking fluid at the end, it creates this bright glow that really catches your eyes. I can also scrub it lightly with a clean, damp nylon brush and press it with paper towel immediately afterwards. And that will soften the edge ever so lightly and create this glowing effect. And it looks wonderful. And number 3, to preserve a lighter shape. This is a bit different from small bright headlight, but there are many times when the middle value shape is smaller with a darker shape. To paint around them is not always easy, and it feels different when you're painting a negative shape versus a positive shape. And when you are painting loosely, it's easy to accidentally cover them up. So I can apply masking fluid after a wash is dry and paint it like a positive shape. In this example, I want to keep these brighter yellow leaves and make sure they are clearly visible from the dark tree leaves. So after the wash is dry, I paint it with masking fluid, remove them after I finish the dark wash. Now the masking fluid might get some of the underlayer paint off, but you can also glaze the color back later. This takes a bit more time than just paint around these shapes, but it makes the process a lot easier and it gives you a higher chance of a successful painting. I hope these tips and examples are helpful. Now I'm going to share with you a demo of this painting to show you how I use masking fluid in context. Before we start though, if you like this video, consider giving it a like and subscribe. Click on the bell icon to get notification on my new video. Your support is appreciated and is the biggest motivation for me to keep updating. Now, let's get started. Okay, let's take a look at the process of this painting. For the line drawing, I am just going to speed it through very quickly because it is not the focus of this demo. However, it doesn't mean that this is any less important than the rest of the painting. This demo is meant to show you how I use masking fluid in a painting, but all the fundamentals such as perspective, structure, they still apply. So work on your drawing, that is still very important, and take your time when you are doing the line drawing for your painting. Now for the trees though, I don't do a lot of details during the drawing stage because that will make me too stiff when I'm painting. I usually like to just deal with them when I am painting, so that will help my brushstroke to be a little bit more spontaneous and lively. And now the drawing is done, I start to use masking fluid. I use the pen shape first to just put some dots for the headlights and the reflections of the headlights. These are going to be the lightest part of this painting, and that's the function of these lights, right? You can see the signal lights and the car headlight and tail light really far away because they are so bright, and that's what I want to achieve in this painting. And after I applied the masking fluid, I let them dry. Here is a little bit of time jump. You see the masking fluid get a little bit dirty. That's because when I erase some more pencil, some of the graphite caught on it, but it doesn't affect the function of the masking fluid. If anything, it actually makes it more visible, which is not a bad thing. So I start to do the wash for the sky. Now you can see that I did put a little bit of value in the sky, and that is because I don't need to leave it completely white. I want it to be actually just slightly darker than the headlights. And actually you can see a little bit of cloud in the sky in the photo anyway, so I decided to do that. So I pretty much give it a wash. So I pretty much wash over the whole paper, so I have just enough moisture for me to paint some soft clouds, wet onto wet. And I can also use this opportunity to put some reflections, some basic reflection values. The point is just to start to put paints on the paper. And these are very soft because I am doing those mostly wet onto wet, so they will fade back into almost nothing. It is also a good time to start to paint some color of the light. So that's why you see me start to paint some warm colors for the headlights and some red for the tail light, some bright turquoise for the signal light. And because the masking fluid will preserve the white, I can just paint them over without any hesitation. Now is also the good time for me to start painting the tree, which is the middle value. They are nice and yellow, so it is a good time to just paint those in. Make sure your mixture has a good consistency of paint because you want those color to stay. You want those warm color to show. I took this photo last year during the fall. Those beautiful yellow trees, those are what I want to have in my painting. And as I start to paint down, some of the area that's a little bit less wet are starting to dry. As you can see, I started creating some hard edges, so that tells me that it's a good time for me to start leaving out some of the highlights on top of the car. So for shapes like that, I will still just paint around it. I don't use masking fluid for everything, just smaller details. And it's important to connect the shape right now. So I connect the shape from the trees to the background buildings, to the car, and to the reflection on the ground. And as you connect the shape, this shape becomes a live shape, which means that it is still moist, it's still wet. You can do some wet onto wet, adding more colors into that big shape, so that makes this shape nice and rich. You don't have to paint a lot of details, but all these colors will suggest a lot of things going on within that big shape. And here is where the masking fluid is doing its trick. So you can see that when I'm painting a reflection on the right, there are actually some reflection from the signal light. And because I apply the masking fluid, I just paint them right over. I don't need to worry about leaving them out, and I don't need to paint them back with gouache later. They will stay very bright. The only thing I need to do right now is to add a little bit of that bright greenish color in the reflection. Because if you try to paint around all these little subtle soft details, it'll be very difficult to keep them very clean and look very nice. So same thing for the reflection of the headlight on the left. Now I did add some warm colors to the reflections on the left, but the brightest value, the white of the paper, they are preserved with the masking fluid. So I continue the shape to the left and also start to give the car the first wash. And I did pay attention to the color of the car. It is a white car, but the dark area do have some warm color on it because of the headlight. And now is the time to paint the tree on the left. Now this is sped up, but I did spend quite a bit of time trying to make those leaves look nice and loose. So these yellow leaves are the middle value of this painting. So even though they look nice and bright, compared to the sky and everything else, they are quite a bit darker. So keep them in the middle value. So that means you want to mix more paint. You don't want to use a very watery mixture because they will fade off. And I just paint that big shape. Focus on making the silhouette looking interesting. And that's about it. Connect to the background. It is a rainy day after all, so you want to keep the background nice and soft to have that sense of atmosphere. So just use a nylon brush, add some details in, and now I want to finish the building on the back. There's just a little bit of the building, so don't need to fuss too much about it. Just add a little bit of detail and stuff here and there. And now the second wash is done, which means we have light value and the middle value. I use a hairdryer to blow it dry because it is a live demo on my Patreon, so I don't want to break it into too many sessions. Just to make sure these are dry. And now I use my bottled masking fluid and use a cheap nylon brush to apply them directly on the trees. That way I can preserve some of these yellow leaves when I paint the dark value on the left. There are quite a bit of dark value on the left, so using some masking fluid to preserve some details will make the process easier. So right now I'm almost like painting the bright leaves in advance. So like I mentioned in another video, painting with masking fluid is like painting positive shape instead of painting negative shape and preserve the light. So it feels very different, and sometimes it is easier to do so. And now while I'm waiting for the masking fluid to dry, I started to paint the dark value. So I don't waste much time. I start with the dark black car on the right. Remember to add the tail light color. And I just continue to paint the dark value, the dark detail, and the car on the left as well, since I'm working on the car. And again, remember to add the warm color so that it feels like the headlight is actually affecting the surrounding instead of just two white spots. Now adding more dark to the right. And we really do need to make sure the values are dark enough because we need to create those contrasts. We have good amount of light and middle value, so adding darks is going to make everything come together. We complete the value range by adding the dark value. So as you can see on the right, you're already starting to see some structures and forms coming out, things starting to look more solid and three-dimensional. And it is always a very exciting stage because this is the time that you start to see your painting come together if you follow the process. One thing you do still need to keep in mind is that if you can connect the shape, still try to connect the shape, even though dark value sometimes gets a little bit more separated because a lot of time dark value only exists in certain areas of details. But if you look at the right, the dark black car and the background, they all sort of connect together. So it is important to still try to connect the shape, otherwise you're going to have a lot of dark spots all over the place and the painting is going to look too busy. So I'm starting to add the dark detail to the left tree, and you can see that the masking fluid is doing its magic to preserve those light leaves. I spray a little bit of water so I can continue to do wet onto wet within that dark value. And just because I apply the masking fluid doesn't mean that when I'm painting the top of the tree, I don't leave out anything at all. The masking fluid is more like an insurance policy in some way, but if you can still paint around and preserve some light where it makes sense, you should still try to do that. And underneath those bright leaves, I added a little bit of dark to make those bright leaves pop out more. And now just adding some more details and darker reflections on the left. And again, try to connect the shape as much as possible. So the painting is really taking its place, and I am quite happy with it at this stage. But this is also a very tricky stage. Last year, I did share in my video that I want my painting, even the looser one, to feel more sophisticated. And that doesn't mean I start to paint a lot of details, but it does mean that I need to make sure every single brushstroke that I do means something. And that's not always easy because towards the end of the painting, you are mentally more tired. You want to finish the painting quickly. So a lot of time during that stage, I started to just blindly and mindlessly paint some dark details. And that usually don't result in a very good looking painting. So now after it is dry, I remove the masking fluid and you can see that headlight just glow, and that's the effect that I was looking for. The headlight is really bright and it really caught your attention. So same thing for the tail light and the signal lights. And these little sparkles of light really make this painting comes alive. Even though they are just small part of the painting, it does add quite a bit of light and energy. And now I also remove the masking fluid for the leaves. And you might notice that the color comes out a little bit washed out because the masking fluid actually picked up a little bit of the pigments underneath. But that's not a big deal at all because I still preserve the light shape. I can just go over sort of with a glaze and to put back some of the yellow colors, and it still looks great. So this painting is actually the first time I ever used masking fluid to preserve the middle value leaves, and it turns out pretty nicely. So this is probably a technique that I'm going to continue use in the future if needed. And here's the part that I use a little bit of a watery mixture to rub around the edge of the highlight. Press it with a paper towel to get that soft glow effect. It's very subtle, but it's a very fun thing to look at when it's done. So credit to where the credit is due, I learned this technique from Master Jianzhong Wei when I was translating and doing voiceover for his tutorial last year. It was a very useful technique. And here is the finished painting. I hope you like this painting and I hope you enjoy this demo and it gives you a better idea how I use masking fluid in my painting, and I hope it helps your painting as well. I hope this video is helpful and enjoyable. Masking fluid is a very useful tool and it can make your painting process easier. But this is not to replace your basic understanding of value and lighting. I always believe it is not the tool that makes a good painting. It's about your understanding of the subject and the medium. So please keep observing the world around you and think about how you want to interpret it in your own painting. That's it for this video and the two-part series about masking fluid. It's been a while since I made this type of lesson videos. It took me a long time to do them, so I certainly hope you enjoy them. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Wish you have a wonderful day wherever you are. Take care and God bless.